I thought I was merely being betrayed by a man until I saw my sister's signature on the marriage license next to my husband's name. They called it love, but I heard them call it a transfer. While they waited for me to collapse, I was simply opening the ledger. They thought they had secured a $400 million fortune, but they had only signed their own sentences. My name is Marissa Caldwell. I am 34 years old, the CEO of Northline Ledger and Risk, and I live my life by a simple principle. Liabilities must be identified, isolated, and neutralized. My penthouse in Seattle offers a panoramic view of the Puget Sound, a dark expanse of water that mirrors the cold, pristine surfaces of my home. Everything here is expensive and clean. There is no dust on the marble countertops and no ambiguity in my bank statements. Or, at least, there wasn't until Grant Hale entered the equation. Grant was polished, the kind of man who looked like he had been manufactured in a boardroom rather than born. We were weeks away from our wedding, yet he remained a closed book regarding his past. Whenever I pressed him, the charm would fracture. "My family is not your business. Marissa," he had said to me just last night, "why do you always have to act like you're auditing me?" We were at a dinner celebrating a major acquisition for my firm. I had merely asked about a standard premarital liability clause regarding his estranged father's debts. Grant's hand had spasmed. His wine glass tipped over, shattering against the edge of the mahogany table. Red wine bled onto the white tablecloth. "Stop it!" he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "You touch things that don't concern you." I watched his hand fly instinctively to the inside pocket of his jacket. It was a quick, unconscious pat, the check of a man ensuring something vital was still hidden. I did not argue. I did not cry. I simply called the waiter for the check. When we returned home, while he slept, I opened a new encrypted file on my private server. I named it Operation Clean Cut. I logged the time of the outburst, the content of his deflection, and the exact nature of the physical tick involving his jacket pocket. It read less like a diary and more like a forensic accounting report. The first anomaly appeared on my phone screen the next morning while I was drinking my espresso. It was a transaction alert from our joint account, time-stamped at 2:58 in the morning. $5,000 paid to a service called Concierge Elite. It was a vague, high-end service provider that had nothing to do with the florists or caterers I was managing. Grant was asleep beside me, his breathing rhythmic and untroubled. Then came the second variable. My sister, Tessa Caldwell, appeared at my door that afternoon. We had not spoken in 3 years. She stood there in a red coat that cost more than her rent used to be, smiling as if she hadn't missed a single birthday. "I've changed, Risa," she said, pulling me into a hug that felt performed. "I want to make up for our childhood. Let me be your bridesmaid. Please. I just want to be there for you." I let her in because I needed to observe the variable in a controlled environment. When Grant came home and I mentioned Tessa was in the guest suite, he froze. It was a micro-reaction, lasting less than a second, before a smooth, practiced smile plastered itself onto his face. "Tessa?" he asked, his voice entirely too casual. "That's wonderful. Darling, I know how much you missed her." I saw it then. The chemistry, the lack of surprise. It was a flicker of recognition he tried to bury under the guise of a supportive fiancé. Later that evening, over a dinner that felt more like a stage play, Tessa leaned in. She didn't ask about my dress or the flowers. "So, have you locked in the prenup lawyer yet?" she asked, her eyes sharp. "You have to be careful. Risa, what about the family trust? Does the vesting schedule trigger immediately upon marriage, or is there a waiting period?" She spoke with the vocabulary of an estate planner, not a wayward sister. Grant kept his eyes on his steak, cutting the meat with surgical precision, but I saw his ear turn slightly toward us. I stood on the balcony later that night, looking out at the black water of the Sound. My heart rate remained steady at 62 beats per minute. I did not feel the sting of betrayal. What I felt was the cold clarity of a discrepancy in the books. They thought I was the emotional bride-to-be. They did not know they were glitches in my system, and I was about to begin the trace. I sat in the dark of my home office, the blue light of 3 monitors illuminating my face. While most brides spent their evenings browsing floral arrangements or debating color palettes, I was running a forensic audit on my own marriage. I pulled the raw data from our joint account and filtered the parameters. The pattern that emerged was as stark and undeniable as a red flag on a quarterly earnings report. Every single Thursday evening, there was a consistent sequence of transactions: a couple's spa package at the Four Seasons, a booking at a boutique hotel downtown, and a dinner reservation at a steakhouse known for its private, high-walled booths. It was not random spending. It was the structural blueprint of a recurring date night, financed entirely by my earnings. My phone buzzed on the mahogany desk, breaking the silence. It was a message from an old contact of mine who now worked in high-end lifestyle media. He had sent a single photograph taken 20 minutes ago in the Bellevue luxury shopping district. The image was grainy but unmistakable. Grant was standing at a jewelry counter, laughing, his hand resting intimately on the small of a woman's back. That woman was my sister, Tessa. But they were not alone. Standing at the register was Grant's mother, Patricia, holding a black card with a triumphant smirk. I zoomed in on the plastic in her hand. It was the supplementary platinum card I had issued to Grant strictly for wedding vendor deposits. I did not scream. I did not throw the phone against the wall. Instead, I picked up my landline and dialed the priority support number for my bank. "This is Marissa Caldwell," I said, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. "I am looking at the activity on the supplementary card ending in 459. I suspect unauthorized usage. Please freeze it immediately. Also, locate any recurring autopay instructions for a vendor labeled Concierge Elite and cancel them, effective now." It did not feel like an act of vengeance. It felt like closing a valve on a leaking pipe. I was simply stopping the hemorrhage. Less than 5 minutes later, my personal cell phone rang. It was Patricia. I let it ring 3 times before sliding my finger across the screen, forcing a groggy, confused tone into my voice. "Hello, Marissa." The card was declined. Patricia shrieked, her voice shrill enough to distort the speaker. "I am standing right at the counter with the sales associate, and it is humiliating. Fix it right now." "Oh, Patricia," I yawned, leaning back in my leather chair. "I am so sorry. The fraud detection algorithms have been very sensitive lately. They probably flagged the spending as unusual behavior for a wedding deposit." "Well, call them and override it," she demanded, panic seeping into her indignation. "I can't do that right now. I left my security token at the office." I lied smoothly. "But Tessa is with you, isn't she? I thought I saw her check in on social media." "Why doesn't she just swipe her card to help you out?" There was a silence on the other end of the line. It was heavy and suffocating. She left her wallet in the car," Patricia stammered, her lie clumsy and desperate. "That is unfortunate," I said. "I guess you will have to put the items back. Good night, Patricia." I hung up before she could respond. Almost immediately, a text message from Tessa appeared on my screen. "You are being so controlling. Risa, Mom is crying. You know she was just trying to buy that watch as a surprise for Grant. It was only $12,000. You can afford it." I stared at the text, a cold smile touching my lips. I had not mentioned the price. I had not mentioned the item. Tessa had just confirmed she was there, standing right next to the register, and that she knew exactly how much of my money they were attempting to siphon. Grant arrived home an hour early. He did not greet me. He did not take off his wet coat. He marched into the living room, his face pale and his eyes wide with a specific breed of terror. "What did you do with the cards, Marissa?" he asked, his voice tight. "My mother just called me in tears. She said you cut her off." He was not asking out of filial piety. He was asking because the liquidity had dried up. I looked up from my laptop, my expression perfectly calm. I didn't do anything malicious. Grant. I noticed some irregularities in the outflow. I am not punishing you, darling. I am just optimizing the budget. He stared at me, his jaw working as if he wanted to scream but knew he couldn't afford to burn the bridge while he was still standing on it. He spun around and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, pulling out his phone to type a furious message to someone. I watched his reflection in the dark glass. He wasn't looking at me. He wasn't worried about our relationship. As I watched his thumbs fly over the screen, the data points finally converged into a single, irrefutable conclusion. The man standing before me was not afraid of losing his wife. He was terrified of losing his administrative access. The invasion began under the guise of sisterly support. Tessa insisted that moving into my penthouse would streamline the wedding preparations, but she did not arrive alone. She brought Grant's mother, Patricia, and his younger brother, Connor. They dragged their heavy suitcases across my limestone floors with the distinct, heavy thud of an occupying force claiming territory. They did not ask where to put their things. They simply began opening doors and claiming the guest suites as if they were dividing spoils of war. It is just for a few days, Risa, Tessa said, dropping her coat onto my white sofa without looking at me. Mom needs to be close to the venue for the fittings, and Connor is here to help Grant with logistics. I watched them spread out like a virus in a clean room. Patricia walked around the living room, touching my sculptures with critical, prying fingers. "It is so cold in here," she muttered, tapping a marble bust. "No warmth, no family photos. It feels like a clinic. The food is cheap, too," Connor added, rummaging through my refrigerator and pulling out a jar of organic olives. "Do you have any real food, or just this rabbit feed?" I did not offer to order pizza. I did not apologize for the temperature. I walked to the central console of my smart home system and silently switched the security protocol from standby to active log. Every camera in the common areas began recording audio and video, uploading the data directly to my encrypted cloud server. "I am going to take a shower," I announced. I went into the master bath, turned on the shower to full pressure, and then quietly stepped back, pressing my ear against the heavy oak door. The sound of the water masked my presence, creating a cone of privacy for them to speak freely. Their voices drifted down the hallway, amplified by the acoustics of the high ceilings. "We are cutting it close on the deadline." Patricia's voice was sharp. "The complainant needs to be established before the 1st of the month." "She trusts me," Grant said, though his voice wavered. "She will sign the papers if I tell her it is for tax purposes." "Do not rely on her stupidity," Tessa snapped. "We need the temporary medical power of attorney. First Republic Bank will not release a dime without proof of incapacitation. If we can't get her to sign the transfer, we declare her unfit." I froze. My hand gripped the cold brass handle of the door. Medical power of attorney. They were not just planning to steal from me, they were planning to erase me. They intended to paint me as mentally unstable to seize legal control of my assets. When I finally emerged from the bedroom, wrapped in a robe, Grant intercepted me in the kitchen. He looked pale, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for hidden microphones. He grabbed my shoulders, his grip too tight, his palms clammy. "Marissa," he whispered, pulling me close. "I know my family can be intense, but please, just let them stay. Don't ask questions. Let me handle it. I promise I am doing this for us." "For us?" I asked, looking into his eyes. I saw panic there. It was the frantic look of a man juggling explosives. "Yes, for us," he breathed. "Just stay calm." Late that night, the penthouse was quiet, but the air was thick with tension. I lay in bed, feigning sleep, while Grant sat in the armchair by the window. Through the crack in my eyelids, I watched him. He was texting furiously. I shifted slightly, angling my head to catch the reflection of his phone screen in the darkened window glass. "Stay calm," he typed. "After the papers are done, everything belongs to us." The us was ambiguous, but given the conversation I had overheard, I knew exactly who it included, and I was not part of the equation. I waited until his breathing deepened into sleep. Then, I slipped out of bed and went to my study. I opened the file marked Operation Clean Cut. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I added a new entry. Objective, secure, high-fidelity audio evidence. Map the legal route for a counterclaim of fraud. Prepare the signature trap. I looked at the glowing screen, my reflection staring back at me. They thought I was fragile. They thought I was a resource to be mined. If they see me as a safe, I thought, closing the laptop with a soft click, then I will become the lock. I sat in a soundproof glass conference room in downtown Seattle, far away from the prying eyes of my household. Across from me sat the two people I trusted to dismantle my life so I could rebuild it properly. Evan Rourke was a private investigator who looked like he slept in his car, and Nadia Klein was a forensic accountant and attorney who looked like she slept in a vault. The air in the room was sterile, recycled, and thick with bad news. Nadia slid a thick document across the polished table. It was the vendor contract Grant had been pushing me to sign for the wedding venue. I flagged a clause on page 42. "Marissa," Nadia said, her finger tapping a paragraph of dense legalese. "He buried a joint liability provision under the guise of insurance requirements. It states that the secondary signer, which is you, assumes full responsibility for all pre-existing financial obligations of the primary organizer. The primary organizer is listed as Grant." "So he wants me to pay for the wedding?" I asked. "No," Nadia corrected, her voice razor sharp. "He wants you to pay for everything he has ever owed. This isn't a wedding contract. It is a debt consolidation vehicle disguised as a venue agreement." Evan cleared his throat and opened his laptop. "It gets worse. I traced the email traffic regarding your prenuptial agreement. You know those drafts he claimed he sent to your family lawyer? He showed me the sent folder." I said, "Spoofed," Evan said flatly. "He created a dummy email account that looked like your lawyer's firm. The documents never left his laptop, and the signature on the revised draft, it is a digital forgery. He cut and pasted it from a DocuSign document you executed in 2021. I felt a coldness spread through my chest, but I did not shiver. I nodded for him to continue. "I ran a deep background check on Grant Hale," Evan said, projecting a mugshot onto the wall monitor. The man in the photo looked younger, rougher, but it was undeniably my fiancé. "His name isn't Grant Hale. It is Garrett Holbrook. He was indicted in Arizona 5 years ago for an investment Ponzi scheme. He took a plea deal that keeps him out of prison, but he is permanently barred from managing third-party assets or holding fiduciary positions. That is why he is so obsessed with you signing everything. He legally cannot touch money unless it is given to him voluntarily." "And Tessa?" I asked. Evan slid another folder forward. "Your sister is drowning. She is currently the defendant in a civil suit for credit card fraud totaling $80,000. She is not here to be a bridesmaid. Marissa, she needs a financial shelter. If she marries well, or if she secures access to a family trust, the lawsuit goes away." Nadia dropped the final bomb. She placed a single sheet of paper on top of the pile. It was a draft for a legal petition. "We found this in a hidden partition on Grant's hard drive," Nadia said softly. "It is a draft for a temporary declaration of incapacity." "They have a doctor lined up a guy who lost his license in Oregon to sign an affidavit stating you are suffering from acute stress-induced psychosis. It is a conservatorship play. They don't just want your money. Marissa, they want to be your legal guardians." I looked at the documents. The betrayal was absolute. It was mathematical. They had calculated my value and were preparing to liquidate me. "Do we strike now?" Evan asked. "No," I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. "If we strike now, they claim it is a misunderstanding. I need them to commit the crime. I need them to log into the system. I looked at Nadia. Give them what they want. Prepare the access credentials, but rig them. I drove home with a smile plastered on my face. When I walked into the penthouse, the atmosphere was tense. Tessa was on the sofa, scrolling through her phone, while Grant paced the kitchen. Good news, I announced, dropping my keys on the counter with a loud clatter. I spoke to the tax consultant. I am going to the bank tomorrow to sign those tax optimization papers for the wedding. It turns out you were right. Grant, merging the accounts before the ceremony saves us about 12%. The change in the room was instant. The tension evaporated, replaced by a hungry, electric energy. Grant stopped pacing. That is great. Honey, he stammered, trying to hide his relief. I told you it was for the best. Tessa looked up from her phone. She didn't smile like a sister. Her eyes darted to Grant, then back to me, assessing the situation with the cold, hard gaze of a shareholder realizing the dividends were about to pay out. Finally, Tessa said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I was so worried you were going to let stress ruin the logistics. I looked at her and realized I was no longer seeing my sibling. I was looking at a predator calculating her cut of the kill. They thought the door was opening. They didn't realize they were walking into a cage. I sat in the server closet of my home office, the hum of the cooling fans providing a steady rhythm to my work. I was configuring the final layer of the trap. I created a new subnetwork on my router and named it Caldwell Guest. To the untrained eye, it looked like a courtesy, a dedicated high-speed line for my visiting family to stream movies or browse the web. In reality, it was a honeypot. Every keystroke, every search query, and every packet of data transmitted through it would be mirrored directly to my private server. I wrote the password on a sticky note family first one and stuck it to the refrigerator door. It was crude, obvious, and absolutely irresistible to greedy people who thought they were smarter than the room. Next came the physical bait. I unlocked an older model tablet, disabled the auto lock feature so the screen would stay bright, and left it casually on the marble coffee table in the living room. On the home screen, sitting alone in a folder labeled Urgent Legal, was a PDF file titled Trust Transfer Draft. I activated a background application that utilized the tablet's front-facing camera to record video whenever motion was detected. Then I retreated to the master bedroom to watch the feed on my primary monitor. It took less than 11 minutes for the trap to spring. Tessa walked into the living room, looking over her shoulder to ensure the hallway was empty. She picked up the tablet, her fingers trembling slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. I watched on my monitor as she tapped the folder. She opened the file. The glow of the screen illuminated her face, twisting her features into a mask of avarice. She pulled out her own phone and began taking pictures of the screen, page by page. Then, she dialed a number. I have it, she whispered, her voice distorted but audible through the tablet's microphone. The structure is all here. We just need the signature. Once she signs, the trustee is bypassed. It is perfect. She did not know that the file was a digital die pack. The moment she opened it, a script embedded in the document executed. It generated a unique, invisible watermark tied to the exact time and GPS location of the device, logging the access as an unauthorized breach of confidential financial data. It was not just a PDF. It was a beacon, and she had just lit it. While Tessa was busy with the tablet, Grant's brother, Connor, was making his own clumsy move. I switched the camera feed to the guest study. Connor was hunched over the decoy laptop I had left open on the desk. He fumbled in his pocket and produced a USB drive, jamming it into the port. He was likely trying to scrape banking passwords or copy my client list to sell to competitors. What he did not know was that the laptop's hard drive had been wiped clean and replaced with a localized sandbox environment. The moment he plugged in the drive, the laptop simply captured the serial number of his device and took a high-definition photo of his face. He cursed under his breath, hitting the keys, unaware that he was starring in a felony evidence reel, I decided to accelerate their timeline to ensure they felt confident enough to walk into the final room. I walked out into the living room, pressing a hand to my temple and stumbling slightly as I reached for the wall. I feel so dizzy, I murmured, letting my eyelids flutter as if I were struggling to focus. The stress is making it hard to think straight. Maybe I really do need that break you talked about. Tessa. Tessa looked at Grant, and I saw the shark-like glint in their eyes. This was the validation they needed for the medical incapacity paperwork. They believed my mind was breaking, which would make the conservatorship plea easy to sell to a judge. You poor thing, Tessa cooed, guiding me to the sofa but checking her watch over my shoulder. Just rest. We will handle the heavy lifting tomorrow. Yes, I said weakly, leaning back. I set up the meeting at the bank for 10 in the morning. The main conference room. I want to get everything signed so I can just sleep. I chose the bank not for convenience, but for custody. The conference room would have 4 distinct camera angles, audio recording, and a sworn notary present. It was a kill box disguised as a meeting space. Nadia had already prepared the counterfilings, the cease and desist, the restraining orders, and the fraud report. While they whispered in the kitchen, celebrating their imminent victory, I returned to my room to check the final logs from the honeypot Wi-Fi, but as I scrolled through the search history from Tessa's phone, my blood ran cold. There, time-stamped at 11:45 at night, was a Google search that revealed their endgame was even faster and darker than I had anticipated. How to file emergency marriage license, Washington State. They were not waiting for the wedding. They were planning to marry each other the moment I was out of the way. I closed the laptop with a snap. The audit was complete. It was time to present the findings. The conference room at First Republic Bank was an arena of glass and polished steel, designed to intimidate anyone who did not have 7 figures in their account. I sat on the left side of the long mahogany table, flanked by Nadia and the bank's senior risk officer, Mr. Henderson. On the opposite side sat the people who had claimed to love me. Grant, his mother Patricia, his brother Connor, and Tessa. They were dressed as if they were attending an awards gala rather than a business meeting. Tessa wore a cream silk blouse and pearls, projecting an image of old money and innocent capability. They looked ready to receive a prize. They did not realize they were sitting in the defendant's chair. Mr. Henderson opened the file in front of him, but before he could speak, Tessa leaned forward, clasping her hands on the table. She pitched her voice to a perfect frequency of concern. "Before we begin," Tessa said, looking sympathetically at me, "I want to address the elephant in the room. My sister she is incredibly overwhelmed right now. The stress of the wedding has affected her cognitive load. I propose that, as her closest blood relative, I act as the signatory for today's transfer. It is just to help her. It was the opening move of the proxy game." Grant nodded solemnly, playing the supportive partner. "She is right," Grant added, reaching for my hand but stopping when I pulled it away. "Marissa has been erratic. We just want to protect the assets." I did not speak. I simply nodded to Nadia. She tapped the spacebar on her laptop. The room filled with the sound of a recorded phone call. It was Tessa's voice, sharp and demanding, devoid of the soft concern she was currently displaying. "Listen to me. This is the family representative. Marissa is having a breakdown. I need the bypass codes for the trust immediately. She is unfit to authorize the transfer." Tessa's face drained of all color. She looked at the laptop speakers as if they were possessed. That is taken out of context," Tessa stammered, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "I was panic-stricken. I was trying to help," I asked calmly. "By impersonating a legal guardian before you actually were, when Nadia did not give them time to recover." She clicked the next file. The large monitor on the wall flickered to life, showing the high-definition footage from the hidden camera in my living room. It showed Tessa hunching over the bait tablet, photographing the fake transfer document. Beside the video feed, a technical log scrolled, highlighting the digital watermark and the device ID of Tessa's phone. This footage was taken 48 hours ago. Mr. Henderson said, his voice dry and professional. The document being accessed was a decoy containing a tracking pixel. This constitutes unauthorized access to confidential financial data and attempted identity theft. Grant stood up, slamming his hands on the table. This is entrapment, you. You set her up. This is ridiculous. Sit down. Grant, I said. My voice was not loud, but it silenced him instantly. I reached into my leather portfolio and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was not a bank document. It was a certified copy from the Clark County Clerk's office in Nevada. I slid it across the table. It spun slowly on the polished wood before coming to rest in front of Grant. I was curious about the trip you two took to Las Vegas 9 days ago. I said, you said it was a bachelor party. Tessa said she was at a spa retreat. But public records are fascinating things. Grant looked down. I watched his eyes scan the document. Certificate of marriage. Groom Garrett Holbrook. Bride Tessa Caldwell. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of oxygen leaving the room. Tessa burst into tears, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of terror. He made me do it. I was coerced. I didn't know what I was signing. Bullshit, Grant roared, turning on her. It was your idea. You said it was the only way to secure spousal privilege if the fraud investigation started. You said it was insurance. I looked at them, watching the alliance crumble in real time. Then I looked at Patricia. She was not looking at her son. She was staring at the paper with a look of pure calculation. So, I said, looking Grant in the eye, if you have been married to my sister for 9 days, then what is my marriage to you? What am I? The question hung in the air. Patricia, flustered and forgetting herself in the heat of the collapse, snapped at me. Oh, stop being so dramatic. Marissa, she spat. You were just a stepping stone. We needed the capital injection to clear Garrett's old debts so they could start fresh. You were never the destination. Mr. Henderson closed his file with a loud, final snap. I have heard enough, the banker said. I am freezing all accounts associated with Mr. Holbrook and Ms. Caldwell pending a federal fraud investigation. Security is waiting outside to escort you off the premises. Nadia leaned in, her voice low and dangerous. And just so you know, bigamy is a felony in this state. So is marriage fraud for financial gain. You might want to save your arguments for the grand jury. Grant slumped back in his chair. He looked defeated. But then I saw it. Under the glass table. His hand moved. He did not reach for his mother. He did not reach for his lawyer. He reached out and gripped Tessa's hand. She did not pull away. Her fingers interlaced with his, tight and desperate. I watched their hands clutch each other and realized the truth. They did not regret the betrayal. They only regretted the failure. They had chosen each other, and they had chosen the money. And now, they would lose both. They moved fast. Within 3 hours of being escorted out of the bank by security, Grant and Tessa had already launched their public relations offensive. They knew they could not win in a courtroom, so they decided to win on social media. My phone began to buzz incessantly with notifications. I opened one of the live streams. Patricia was standing on the sidewalk outside my building, tears streaming down her face, clutching a handkerchief as if she were a Victorian widow. My daughter-in-law threw us out. Patricia sobbed into the camera of a local gossip blogger. We tried to help her. She is mentally unstable. She has been controlling our finances, cutting off our access to food and shelter. It is financial abuse. I watched her performance with a detached fascination. It was a good narrative. It positioned them as victims of a wealthy, heartless executive, but while they were busy weeping for the cameras, they made a fatal tactical error behind the scenes. At 4 p.m, the board of directors at Northline Ledger and Risk received an anonymous email. The subject line read, "Urgent whistleblower complaint." The body of the email accused me of laundering money through shell vendors and attached a complex spreadsheet as proof of my embezzlement. I sat in my office with Evan and Nadia. Evan was grinning. "Do you see what they attached?" Evan asked, pointing to the screen. "I see it," I replied. "It is the bait file." The spreadsheet they sent to destroy my reputation was the exact same file Tessa had stolen from the decoy tablet. They hadn't even bothered to rename it. They thought it was a legitimate ledger of my crimes. They did not know it was a digital boomerang. "The tracking ID embedded in the file just pinged," Evan said, typing rapidly. "The email was not sent from a secure whistleblower server. It was sent from the free Wi-Fi at the coffee shop 3 blocks from your apartment. The MAC address matches the laptop we identified as belonging to Connor, Grant's brother. We have them on defamation, corporate espionage, and malicious interference with business relations." "And that is not all," Nadia added, sliding a fresh court filing across my desk. "Tessa has been busy. She just filed an emergency ex parte motion for temporary guardianship. She is claiming you are a danger to yourself and your assets." I picked up the document. Attached to it was a medical evaluation signed by a Dr. Eris Thorne, diagnosing me with acute paranoid schizophrenia and recommending immediate transfer of financial control to my next of kin. "Dr. Thorne," I asked. "I have never met a Dr. Thorne." "Neither has the clinic listed on the letterhead," Nadia said, her voice dry. "I called them 10 minutes ago. They have no physician by that name. The medical license number he used belongs to a dermatologist who died in 2019. It is a forgery, Marissa, and a bad one." I stood up and walked to the window. They were throwing everything they had at the wall, hoping something would stick. It was time to stop playing defense. "Activate Alpha Protocol," I said. "Are you sure?" Evan asked. "That locks everything." "Do it," I commanded. "Revoke all digital certificates associated with my personal devices. Isolate the firm's servers and release the transparency statement to the board. Tell them we are under a coordinated attack involving identity theft and falsified documents. Attach the proof of the spoofed email and the fake medical report. I am not hiding this. I am bringing it into the light." My phone vibrated again. It was a text message from Grant. "If you report me, I will drag you down. I know secrets about your clients that would ruin Northline. Settle this privately, or I burn it all." I did not reply. I simply took a screenshot and uploaded it to the secure evidence server. He had just handed me a blackmail charge to add to the pile. "Nadia," I said, turning back to the room, "call their lawyer. Tell them I am ready to negotiate. Tell them if they want to settle, they need to come to a meeting tomorrow night to sign a termination agreement and withdraw the guardianship petition. Make them think I am scared of the scandal." "You are inviting them back in?" Nadia asked. "I am inviting them to their own funeral," I said. "When they use public opinion as a weapon, I use evidence as ammunition." Nadia had arranged the meeting in a neutral location, a small conference room in a boutique hotel near the waterfront. It was quiet, private, and utterly devoid of warmth. I sat alone at the table until the door opened and Tessa walked in. She looked smaller than she had on the live stream, without an audience. Her posture slumped, and the defiant victimhood she wore for the cameras was replaced by a sullen, resentful glare. She sat down and immediately reached for a tissue, though her eyes were dry. "You were always the golden child," Tessa whispered, twisting the tissue in her fingers. "Mom and Dad looked at you like you were the sun. I was just the shadow. I was the one who made mistakes, so I was the one who got left behind. Do you have any idea how that feels?" I watched her performance with the dispassionate gaze of an auditor reviewing a fraudulent expense report. "Save the therapy session for someone who charges by the hour." "Tessa," I said, my voice flat. "You did not come back for the family. You came back for the $400 million. She flinched. The specific number hit her like a physical blow. It was the estimated value of the trust fund Grant had been trying to access. Evan stepped out from the shadows of the corner of the room. He did not say a word. He simply placed a photograph on the table in front of her. It showed Tessa sitting at a sticky table in a dive bar with a man in a cheap suit. "That is Marcus Vane," I said. "He is not a lawyer. He is a consultant who specializes in debt evasion strategies for bankrupt gamblers. His favorite tactic is the hasty marriage followed by a conservatorship play. The plan was simple. Wasn't it Grant marries me? You marry Grant. You declare me mentally incompetent, and then you, as the concerned next of kin, take control of the estate." Tessa stared at the photo. Her lip trembled. It doesn't have to be like this," she stammered, leaning forward, her eyes wide and desperate. "Just sign one time. Risa, just one signature. If you release the initial tranche of funds, we can pay off the debts. We can make it all go away. Nobody has to get hurt." There it was, the admission. She did not care about my mental health. She did not care about my well-being. She viewed me as an obstacle between her and a bank transfer. "You do not need a sister," I said softly. "You need a pen." Before she could answer, the door banged open. Grant strode in, his face flushed with anger. He had evidently been waiting in the hallway and had lost his patience. He marched over to Tessa and grabbed her arm, pulling her up from the chair roughly. "Get up, kitten," he snapped. "She is not going to deal. I told you she was too stubborn." Kitten. I froze. It was a small, tawdry pet name, but it carried the weight of a sledgehammer. Grant had never called me by a pet name. He was always formal, always distant, but the way he looked at her, the possessive grip on her arm, the intimacy of the nickname, it confirmed what the logic had already suggested. They were not just co-conspirators. They were a couple. I was the third wheel in my own marriage. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single document. I slid it across the table toward them. "This is a settlement agreement," I said. "It states that you admit to the fraudulent debt. You withdraw the guardianship petition immediately, and you relinquish any claim to my assets. In exchange, I will not file criminal charges for the identity theft or the bigamy. You walk away with nothing, but you walk away free." Grant laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. He picked up the paper and tore it in half. "You think you can buy us off with mercy," Grant sneered. "I want $10 million. Call it a severance package. If you don't pay, we keep talking. We will go on every talk show in America. We will tell them you are an abusive, paranoid lunatic who trapped us." Tessa nodded, stepping behind him for protection. "If you don't pay, Risa, I will make you famous in a way you will never recover from." I looked at them. I looked at the torn paper on the table. They were doubling down. They believed that the threat of public scandal was their leverage. They did not understand that I had already factored reputation damage into the risk model. I nodded slowly, as if accepting the terms of a business transaction. "Good," I said. "You have rejected the settlement. That means we move to Plan B." I stood up and gathered my things. I did not look back as I walked to the door. Behind me, the room fell silent. They looked at each other, and for the first time, I saw the arrogance crack. They realized too late that I had not been negotiating for peace. I had been fulfilling a procedural requirement before declaring total war. As I closed the door, I heard them start to argue, their voices rising in panic as the reality of their position finally began to set in. I sent the message at exactly 8 in the morning. It was brief, submissive, and carefully crafted to bypass their suspicion and trigger their greed. "Meet me at the Grand Fairmont Conference Suite at 7 tonight. I am tired of fighting. I will sign the transfer of the trust management if we can end this immediately. Bring the bank representative and the papers." I arrived an hour early to set the stage. I chose a circular room with floor-to-ceiling windows and a 360-degree camera system concealed in the ceiling fixtures. Along with Nadia and Evan, I had invited a senior compliance officer from the bank, Mr. Henderson, and a private security detail that stood silently by the doors. But the most important person in the room was sitting in the corner, her back turned to the entrance, reviewing a thick stack of court documents. Her name was Elena, a woman from Ohio with tired eyes and a very specific legal standing regarding Grant. At 7 o'clock sharp, the doors opened. Grant walked in first, wearing a smug, victorious smile that made my stomach turn. Tessa walked beside him, clutching a designer bag, her chin held high as if she were already the mistress of the estate. Patricia brought up the rear, carrying a large, empty tote bag, her eyes scanning the room not for people, but for assets. They sat down opposite me without waiting for an invitation. Grant slid a thick leather folder across the table. "You made the right choice, Marissa," Grant said, his voice dripping with condescension. "This is better for everyone. You need rest, and we need stability." "Just sign the authorization on the last page," Tessa added, tapping the leather folder with a manicured fingernail. "It grants full power of attorney to Grant and me as your designated guardians. Once you sign, we can take care of everything." I looked at the folder, then at Nadia. Nadia leaned forward, her expression unreadable. "Before she signs," Nadia said calmly, "I need you to read Clause 12 aloud. It is a mandatory disclosure for the bank representative." Grant sighed, annoyed by the delay. He flipped to the page and began to read, his voice bored. Clause 12 states that the signatory acknowledges they are suffering from diminished capacity and voluntarily cedes control of all assets, totaling $400 million, to the designated trustees due to an inability to manage their own affairs. "Stop," I said. I stood up and walked to the whiteboard behind me. I pulled down a black cloth, revealing a complex timeline I had drawn up. It connected every single dot: the unauthorized credit card charges at the jewelry store, the digital watermark from the stolen bait file, the IP address of the defamation email, the forged medical report from the non-existent doctor, and finally, the marriage certificate from Nevada dated 9 days ago. "This is not a transfer," I said, my voice echoing in the silent room. "This is a confession." Grant stared at the board, his face paling. "What is this?" "This is the roadmap of your fraud," Evan said from the side. "You are stalling," Tessa shrieked, slamming her hand on the table. "This is ridiculous. She is mentally unstable. Just look at this conspiracy board. She is crazy." "Am I asked. "You just admitted you want me to sign a document declaring myself incapacitated. Why?" "Because you are sick," Tessa yelled, losing her composure entirely. "And if you are sick, if you are declared unfit, then I am your sister. I am your next of kin. I have the right." Her words hung in the air like the smoke from a fired gun. She had just confirmed that the diagnosis was a tool for acquisition, not a medical reality. "Actually," a voice said from the corner, "you don't." Elena stood up and turned around. Grant froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. "Hello, Garrett," Elena said, using his real name. She tossed a file onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud. "You forgot to finalize our divorce in Ohio 7 years ago. You just stopped paying the lawyer and ran. Which means your marriage to Tessa is not just a sham, it is bigamy." The room erupted into silence. Tessa looked at Grant, her eyes wide with horror. You are married," Tessa whispered, her voice trembling. But we signed the papers in Vegas. You said you were free." "He lied," I said coldly. "Just like he lied about the investment fund. Just like he lied about loving me." Mr. Henderson, the bank representative, stood up and smoothed his suit jacket. "I have heard enough. I am formally freezing all assets associated with Mr. Holbrook and Ms. Caldwell. I am also handing this entire file, including the admission of the intent to defraud a mentally incapacitated person, to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division." 2 security guards stepped forward, blocking the exit. Patricia gasped, clutching her empty bag to her chest. "You can't do this!" Patricia screamed. We are family. No, I said, reaching for the remote control on the table. You are defendants. The room went deadly quiet. Grant was shaking his head, looking for a way out, but there were no doors left open for him. I looked straight at my sister. She was trembling, realizing that the fortune she had killed her relationship with me for was gone, and in its place was a prison sentence. There is one last thing, I said softly. I pressed the play button on the remote. The speakers crackled to life, filling the silent conference room. It was the sound of Tessa's voice, sharp, clear, and undeniable, captured by the honeypot network I had set days ago, sealing her fate. Once we declare her incompetent, the transfer happens. We split the initial payout, 70-30. I earned it, Grant. I am the one playing the sister. I am the one who has to pretend to care about her. Breakdown. The audio cut off, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. Tessa stared at the speaker, her face draining of all color until she looked like a wax figure. The timestamp on the screen matched the log from my secure server perfectly. There was no way to claim it was AI-generated or taken out of context. It was a raw, unfiltered conspiracy to commit fraud. Elena, the woman sitting quietly in the corner, finally stood up. She walked over to the table and placed a certified court document directly in front of Tessa. "He is not your husband," Elena said, her voice tired but firm. "He is mine. Garrett and I were married in Ohio 7 years ago. He ran off when the debts piled up, but he never filed for divorce. Your marriage in Nevada. It is void. In the eyes of the law, you are not his wife. You are just his accomplice." Tessa looked down at the paper, her hands trembling violently. She looked at Grant, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and betrayal. She realized in that second that she was not the future mistress of a $400 million estate. She was just a disposable pawn in a game she did not understand. Nadia stepped forward, relentless. She laid out the rest of the cards. "We have the forged medical report signed by a deceased doctor." Nadia listed, dropping paper after paper. "We have the spoofed emails sent from your brother's laptop. We have the defamatory spreadsheet with the tracking pixel that leads back to you. This is a RICO case wrapped in a ribbon." Mr. Henderson, the bank representative, nodded grimly. "This constitutes conspiracy to commit bank fraud and identity theft against a high-net-worth client. I am obligated to file a suspicious activity report with the Treasury Department immediately." Grant stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He pointed a shaking finger at me, his eyes wild. "She is crazy," he shouted, sweat beading on his forehead. "Don't you see? She orchestrated all of this. She is paranoid. She is unfit to lead her company. If you arrest us, I will tell the world she is unstable." I looked at him calmly. He was still trying to play the reputation card, unaware that the game had changed. "You can't threaten me with a scandal I have already disclosed," I said. "My board of directors received a full briefing on this situation 6 hours ago. They know about the attacks. They know about the blackmail. They have already issued a vote of full confidence in my leadership. You have no leverage left." Then I delivered the final blow. I picked up the leather folder they had tried to force me to sign, and the funniest part I asked, looking Grant in the eye, "You did all this for the $400 million in the trust, but you didn't read the fine print of the trust structure. The fund has a protection clause. If the primary beneficiary is declared mentally incompetent or placed under guardianship, the assets do not transfer to the guardian. They are immediately frozen and placed under the management of a blind charitable trust for 20 years. By trying to declare me crazy, you didn't unlock the vault. You welded it shut." Patricia let out a wail, a high-pitched sound of pure despair. She lunged toward the table, her face twisted in ugly rage. "You did this," she screamed at me. "You selfish girl! You trapped us! You knew we needed the money! Excuse me, Mr. Henderson interrupted, his voice cutting through her hysteria. "Did you just admit that your motivation was financial necessity rather than the welfare of the client?" That statement has been recorded in the minutes? The doors opened. 2 uniformed security officers stepped in, followed by a plainclothes detective. Grant tried to pull away, stammering excuses, but the officer grabbed his arm firmly. Tessa stood up, clutching her designer bag to her chest as if it were a life preserver, tears streaming down her face. She looked at me, pleading silently for a sisterly intervention that would never come. They were led out of the room one by one. Before Tessa passed through the door, I called out to her. "Tessa," I said. She stopped and looked back, her mascara running down her cheeks. "You married my husband to get my money," I said, my voice steady and cold. "But you just married a prison sentence." The door closed, cutting off the sound of Patricia's sobbing. The room was suddenly very quiet. I sat alone at the large table, surrounded by the evidence of their betrayal. I picked up my pen and signed the restraining order Nadia had prepared. The city lights of Seattle twinkled through the glass walls, cold and distant. I did not feel the warmth of a happy ending. I felt the clean, sterile satisfaction of a balanced ledger. The error had been identified. The liability had been removed. The system was finally correct. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment below, sharing your location and your thoughts on Marissa's revenge. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like the video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to us.